Israel discovered chemical weapons in a Hezbollah terrorist facility inside Lebanon, and gas masks and drug substances meant for kidnapping and subduing Israeli civilians. Also, there may have been a very sinister and dark reason that Israel was forced, yes, forced, to accept the ceasefire deal this week, and it might have to do with America withholding weapons shipments to Israel. Bottom line, was the ceasefire good or bad for Israel and the free world? What do you think? We're going to get into all of this on today's weekly roundup. I'm Luke Hilton, and this is the Israel Guys. Welcome to the Israel Guys, where we believe that in a world of anti-Israel propaganda and Jew hatred, you should have a direct connection to the land and people of Israel. Guys, happy Thanksgiving. Hope you had a wonderful holiday with your families. By the way, let us know what you think about the new studio in the comment section below. This is not a full public reveal, but it's kind of more like a sneak preview. It's more of a teaser. I mean, I'm not going to tell you what all we're doing with the new studio, and the old studio has not gone away completely, but you will be seeing more of this in the future, and you're definitely going to want to subscribe because we have lots of amazing plans for 2025. But I'm here with Joshua Waller. If you're a longtime subscriber of the Israel Guys, you'll know that we used to do this together. And even though we're both on the show every single week, we've been separate. So this is a little bit of a pilot program of something that we're going to start on Fridays. One of the things I mentioned coming in 2025, probably even more than just Joshua and I, probably even more guests every Friday with everything you need to know coming out of Israel. But great to be back together.
Luke, I was going to ask you how many calories you had for Thanksgiving yesterday and if you've worked out since or how that's going. But I think instead of getting all into personal matters of how life is going for you, maybe we dig straight into what maybe the audience is probably looking forward to more. And that is talking about what's going on here in Israel. Is that okay?
Well, my biggest question is obviously like ceasefire in Lebanon.
Right.
Ceasefire between Israel and Lebanon, good or bad? Your 2-second thoughts.
Well, my first take is that ceasefires when you're winning are bad because you should just go ahead and win, like downright win. There's nobody that said Israel has claimed a victory over Hezbollah yet. Hezbollah is there.
Right.
They're still an entity.
They're not eradicated, yeah.
Yeah, so I would say that it's a bad idea. If and it's historic that when Israel begins to start winning, the world goes, ceasefire, please, ceasefire. Was anybody ever calling for Hezbollah to have a ceasefire when they were pounding Israel with rockets? Right. No. So it's really a horrible thing, I think, in the grand scheme of things, that they would call for ceasefires right when Israel's like just about to finish the job.
So I do agree with you. I guess my only caveat is, well, there's a very sinister reason why Israel might have been forced to accept the ceasefire. Right. I'm going to talk about that in a second. But my only other caveat is when Israel has faced multiple war fronts, meaning Hezbollah, Hamas, Yemen, Houthis in Yemen, Iran, Syria, Iraq on some level, right? In the last more than a year now, we're talking like 14 months now. There's a very just real physical reality of how long can they endure war? Such a tiny country too, because when you evacuate 60,000 civilians out of the north, there's only so long you can sustain that model. Right. And also tens of thousands of civilians along the Gaza border. So there might have been just a very real practical aspect of Israel really needed to begin to get their country back to normal. Obviously, we don't even know if this 60-day ceasefire is going to hold. And Hezbollah has already violated it multiple times this week.
But if you look at the news, Luke, this is what's astounding is I've just typed it in before we did the show just to see what the latest was. And they're saying, well, all the big major news networks are saying Israel, even despite the ceasefire and Israel's airstrikes, Israel, they're making it sound like Israel's the one that's the problem. Israel's aggressor.
Sure. Israel's always the problem.
Israel's the problem. Well, what the idiots don't understand is that the reason why Israel went in is because there was terrorists that were coming into the zones. It was part of the ceasefire agreement. And if they break the ceasefire agreement, by fighting Israel, then Israel has every right in the ceasefire agreement to attack. Except for in the headlines, they make it look like Israel's the aggressor. So I kind of have a little problem with that as well.
And Israel actually discovered some very horrible stuff right across the border just this week, which I'm going to talk about here in a second. But biggest question that's kind of it's kind of been suppressed, but I've seen it in a couple of places. This might be a very sinister secret reason why Israel didn't actually want to accept a ceasefire, but they were forced to. And that is the question. Question is, was Israel actually out of weapons and ammunition, or almost out of weapons and ammunition, might have been one of the stipulations that the Biden administration was trying to force for Israel to accept a ceasefire, that the U.S. will actually unfreeze weapons and supplies shipments if Israel agrees to the terms of the ceasefire, right? Bibi Netanyahu did a televised address to the nation of Israel this week where he hinted that delays in arms shipments was one of the reasons that Israel had to agree to the ceasefire, right? And I'll give you some more quotes from his speech, but Speaker of the House Mike Johnson on Tuesday night, so right after the ceasefire was announced, right, slammed the Biden administration over continued delays and roadblocks on weapons and aid shipments to Israel. He said, quote, "While the Biden-Harris administration celebrates this announcement, remember that it's still withholding weapons to Israel. This administration put up roadblock after roadblock on Israel and dragged out this conflict."
Here's what I find interesting, Lucas, is that these are not like happy birthday presents. This is not like, oh, you're in a war. These are free gifts to Israel. I think a lot of people actually think that. They think that, oh, America is supporting Israel and sending him the equipment that they need. Well, that's not actually the case. They're actually withholding weapons that Israel purchased. A lot of the purchased weapons that Israel has in these deals, they're blocking weapons. Purchased resupply of purchased weapons. So, that's even, you talk about sinister. I think that's even more sinister than, it's one thing if you're like, hey, I'm going to give you something. Another thing is you're like, I'm buying something we're under contract for this. We've planned a war against our enemies based off of this contract. And now you're stopping the contract. That's
Israel's not fighting a war. They're fighting like 5 wars. Well, you got
right, not just one.
They're eradicating Hamas, which they're close to completing that objective, right? They've eradicated a huge chunk of Hezbollah. They've had to strike Iran multiple times. They've had to defend themselves against Yemen and Syria and Iraq. Like, how's a tiny, tiny nation supposed to defend themselves when when their greatest allies just cut off their arms shipments, right? Few things are more powerful than a father's love. For Sa'ar Axelrod, an IDF soldier and devoted father, this love has fueled his courage and resilience. Living a peaceful life with his wife, young son, and eagerly awaiting a second child, Sa'ar's world changed when he was called to defend Israel's northern border on October 7th. On February 14th, a missile struck close to his position, leaving him gravely injured. In those critical moments, Sa'ar's only thoughts were of his family. His determination to survive was for them, as he resolved, "My son won't grow up without a father." Thanks to supporters like you, Sa'ar received immediate care and began his journey to recovery. But the journey is long and difficult. He faces intensive rehabilitation, mounting medical bills, and the goal of returning to his family. Sa'ar's dreams of lifting his children again and rebuilding his life, but he and many soldiers like him need help to make that dream possible. Every donation not only aids Sa'ar, but also countless other soldiers and their families whose lives have been irrevocably altered in service to Israel. Today, you can honor the sacrifices of these soldiers by contributing. You're helping them heal, rebuild, and return to their loved ones. Please consider donating to support Sa'ar and others like him on the road to recovery. Together, we can stand with Israel's defenders and honor the love and courage of fathers just like him who give everything for their families and their homeland. Donate now. Link is in the description below. Stand with Israel's wounded warriors because they have already stood for us.
Well, I'll tell you how they get back to where they were, 40, 50 years ago, where they were actually supplying all of their own. And I think that's actually the hard lesson Israel's learned right now is that they have to. Their defense has to be held in their own hands. They can't look to America. That's a shameful thing to say, but they can't look to other countries for their key protective equipment that they actually have to build that in-house.
And from what I understand, like even in the 1980s or something, maybe you were the one that researched this, like America actually stipulated that Israel agreed to not produce a lot of their own weapons, right? In exchange for arms deals with the U.S.
Or they had to produce them in the States to have that agreement.
Right, like they couldn't produce in country. So Bibi Netanyahu addressed the nation this week. He didn't say for sure that the U.S. is withholding weapons, but he did say, quote, "They repeatedly appeased Iran rather than show unequivocal support to our closest ally in the region. Israel's military success has been in spite of the White House, not because of it. We always hope for peace in the region and still do during this 60-day ceasefire, but it's President Trump's administration that will pave the way to lasting peace because peace only comes through strength." So Bibi obviously feeling more bold after President Trump was elected in the United States. And he's actually coming down pretty hard on the White House that Israel's success is in spite of the Biden administration, not because of it.
Right.
So very interesting if this whole ceasefire was forced on Israel simply so that they could continue to get the supplies and equipment and weapons and munitions that they actually need. So there's a pretty incredible, like, preposterous discovery, and it's very likely that this is true because it came from war correspondents that typically get their information from the IDF. And that is that Israel, or the IDF, discovered chemical weapons and gas masks and substances for drugging people just on the other side of the Lebanon border, the Israeli-Lebanon border. Meaning, Hezbollah was probably planning to use chemical weapons, which kind of escalates any world war to an entirely another level when you pull out the chemical weapons, right? Like, that is next level.
Right.
And two, probably planning to kidnap Israeli civilians and drag them into Lebanon, which is not very far-fetched considering that's what all of Israel's enemies try to do, is kidnap their civilians and drag them into enemy countries and then kill them and hold them, as there's still 101, I think, hostages inside of Gaza that Hamas is holding. So already, like, news coming out that Israel is just completely justified in eradicating Hezbollah and possibly forced to stop their war against Hezbollah. And already this week, they've had to respond to several violations of the ceasefire, including one attempt by Hezbollah to infiltrate the border. And I think several airstrikes when Hezbollah has violated ceasefire. So, like, I don't know, any bets on how long you want to bet that this ceasefire is going to hold up?
But you remember, according to the New York Times, that poor terrorist that had to run into Israel, it's Israel's fault for shooting him, because that was against the Israel broke the ceasefire when they started shooting these guys. Well, how idiotic is
when
that?
They invade their country?
Yeah, right. Of course. Who starts what, right? So you got to, if in order to keep a ceasefire, the terrorists have to stop. They have to listen to the rules too. You can't be running into Israel, jumping over security barriers and fences. That's not. Luca, what I want to say is that, okay, what if we just were to put this in any other scenario? Because people treat Israel differently than they do any other country. They look at Israel and they have this little box, and you could say this is okay. This by the definition of anti-Semitism, maybe you could just say that this is the definition, treating Israel and the Jewish people differently than any other country, and the world is so full of that. And this is a prime example of that. Once again, when you have calling Israel for a ceasefire, do you think anyone in the right mind, if you had a terrorist group infiltrate in the U.S., do you not think that or anywhere else in the world?
I mean, let's say ISIS, 10 years ago, ISIS was like the world threat, right? I mean, they didn't get much sympathy from anybody that I know of.
Right.
But like, ISIS takes over America. Who wants ISIS to stay in America, and who wants them to be gone?
Yeah, like, really. I mean, your fight against terrorism, America had their own 20 years of fighting against terrorism. I mean, I think they should probably continue fighting terrorism. It's not something that's dead. It needs to be finished. And anyone that wants to tolerate that kind of action in the world is just literally burying their head in the sand to try to act like it's not there, and it'll show up in the next couple years ahead of them. So I think it's outrageous that the free world is not understanding Israel's place in the Middle East. Israel is fighting terrorists, and they need the support to do so, just like any other country on the planet would be given room to fight terrorism. Terrorism's not anywhere in the world seen as a good thing. Aside from here in Israel, it's misrepresented as, Israel's the aggressor. Nowhere in the world, if you fought terrorism, would you be thought as be the aggressor?
When we're talking about Lebanon too, like, let's remember, Hezbollah does not equal Lebanon. Yeah. Now, Hezbollah has taken over a large chunk of Lebanon, including part of the Lebanese government, right?
Yeah.
But like, when you talk about Gaza, Gaza is Hamas. Hamas is Gaza, right?
Yes.
They are the government. We talk about Palestinian Authority and like controlled by Fatah, like one and the same. You don't have like, Palestinian Authority has been taken over by Fatah. You don't have Gaza Strip taken over by Hamas, because even though you could make a case for it, but like, they were legitimately elected.
Well, you have
right?
at least 80%.
So you have like, but Hezbollah has tried to take over Lebanon, has not fully succeeded. There's a Lebanese army, and part of the ceasefire agreement is that at least 5,000 Lebanese army troops are supposed to be in the southern region, the southern south of the Litani River, to help hold up their end of the ceasefire, right? That's not Hezbollah. That's the regular Lebanese army. So you would think that it would be a good thing for the world and for Lebanon to get rid of Hezbollah, right?
Well, not only get rid of Hezbollah as we see it, the terror forces, but also get rid of the Hezbollah that are making leadership decisions within the country's government. Because to separate that, if
Get
you
them
have
out of the parliament.
yeah, if you got them in the parliament, okay, so then that military is actually being directed by Hezbollah now, right? So you can't separate Hezbollah and the military actions from the government of Lebanon and the Hezbollah terrorist if they're sitting in the seat of government. So I'd like to see that obliterated as well. I don't know.
You would think everybody, like anybody in their right mind, would want to see that obliterated, but apparently not, because no, let's have a ceasefire so that they can stop being eradicated.
Yeah, right.
So we can let them live. Why would we let the terrorists live? I thought this was an interesting headline that Switzerland decided not to ban Hezbollah because Switzerland is typically like they're like the historically neutral country, right? That never gets involved in conflicts and world wars.
Yeah.
They did ban Hamas. So apparently Hamas was bad enough for them to ban. A lot of other countries have banned Hamas and Hezbollah. And just this story was interesting in the light of Hamas getting kicked out of Qatar recently. And now they're finding their new home in Turkey, which brands Turkey as the new headquarters for terrorism. I don't know. Maybe they're trying to take over or take the place of Iran as like the world's sponsor of terrorism. But interestingly, the federal Swiss government said that the conditions they have in place for banning groups have not been met by Hezbollah. But Hezbollah is not bad enough. Okay.
So maybe this gas
under their
things, maybe that'll be enough. What they just found over the last 2 days.
Chemical weapons that they're planning to use on
against
Israel.
Civilians, even, maybe. I wonder if that's powerful enough.
So the federal under the Swiss Intelligence Act, a ban requires prior sanctions by the United Nations, because we all know that the United Nations is full of common sense people that make great decisions for the world.
Just trust them.
And or like some kind of prohibition, right, by the UN. In a statement, Swiss officials said quote, bans on organizations must continue to follow this political line because they don't want to get outside of their politics of staying neutral. And it's not appropriate to make a new law that specifically targets Hezbollah because apparently they're not bad enough. So they have banned Hamas because of their, quote, unprecedented terrorist attacks, because they were so awful. But they did say if they were going to ban Hezbollah, it would have to be for a very, very serious reason. Have to be for a serious reason.
You know what I want to know, Luke, is that we know the percentage of Hamas support in Gaza was very, very high, upwards of 80%.
Right. And in Judea and Samaria.
Also here in Judea and Samaria, all over Israel, in the Muslim supporting areas of Israel, there was a lot of support for it. Now I wonder if we take that same, what we really need to find out now is Lebanon. What is there hope for Lebanon? What is the story? How embedded is Hezbollah?
Right.
And I haven't yet seen a stat on that, but I would like to see. I'm very leery that
can they actually get rid of Hezbollah?
Yeah, I don't know that they can get rid of it. I think that just like in Syria and other places, even in Jordan, these groups have a lot of support. The hostile groups to Israel's existence have a lot of support. Now, sometimes it's kind of covered up, but I would like to see an actual figure on what that is before we make a decision on if this is even salvageable.
Possible, yeah.
If Israel can treat this like Gaza, there's no way, 100% not. You cannot make peace with people that want to kill you. It doesn't work. You have to be strong, and you have to hold that territory. And I haven't made up my mind yet. I don't know. Israel, I think that the state of Israel needs to be very strong on this, or we're going to see more October 7th.
Right.
Which is unacceptable. We can't allow. We need to give Israel good pressure. The world is full of bad pressure on Israel, and we need to just give Israel the pressure and the support.
Well, everybody says that, yeah, a lot of times Israel makes decisions based off of international pressure. Yeah. So you can blame that on your country's administration, whether you live in Europe, the United States, or Australia, whatever it is. Or you can say, we as individuals support Israel to be strong and defend their borders no matter what that takes, to be sovereign in their own territory, right?
Right.
So I think that's where we can talk about good international pressure. So the IDF spokesperson's unit released a detailed report on their northern Operation Northern Arrows, which is the name of their operation fighting against Hezbollah in Lebanon. Put out a whole bunch of numbers. So this is good news, even though Hezbollah has not been eliminated. This is some good news as far as how much they have been crippled, right? 12,500 Hezbollah terror targets struck, including 1,600 military command centers, 1,000 weapons storage facilities. I don't know if you remember the numbers, but I think, what was it, 130,000 rockets and missiles that Hezbollah had pointed at Israel before the war started?
Yeah. Upward.
Something like that.
Yeah.
So we don't know how many, at this point, how many rockets and missiles they still have, but we're talking 1,600 military command centers, 1,000 weapons storage facilities already taken out. So as far as where that happened, 1,000 terrorist infrastructure targets were struck in the Bekaa Valley, 360 targets in Beirut, which is the headquarters of Hezbollah, right, and deep inside the country. The Israeli Air Force had 11,000 takeoffs for strikes in Lebanon and 14,000 fighter jet flight hours. Israeli Navy conducted 25,000 division-level raids. We're talking, Israel has not been messing around. I guess what struck me is that Israel appeared to wait a really long time before they invaded Lebanon, right?
Right,
before they invaded Hezbollah.
Right.
Obviously, they were doing limited strikes. They were defending themselves. They had
Well,
stuff
thankfully
going
they didn't
on.
wait as long as they did in Gaza. I mean, what we saw there could have been even more. They're much more sophisticated than what we saw in Gaza. It could have been an absolute horror, even more than October 7th, if we'd have seen that same kind of attack happen in Lebanon, which it certainly seems like they were preparing.
Right. And but what struck me is that it seemed like Israel very slowly went into Gaza, and it took them a really long time to ramp up their fighting against Hamas, right? They wait, and on the opposite side, the flip side, they waited a very long time to actually invade Lebanon and start fighting Hezbollah. But when they did, man, they went to town. They were taking out Hezbollah left and right. And it was a matter of days before Hezbollah was crippled, and the world started realizing, Israel's going to win this very, very fast, right? As far as the Radwan forces, which is Hezbollah's elite military fighting forces, which is a big difference between Hezbollah and Hamas. Hezbollah had very sophisticated, well-trained, first world kind of military fighting force. That was the Radwan forces. Israel took out 1,500 terror infrastructure targets, 160 command centers, 150 weapon storage facilities dismantled, 2,500 Hezbollah terrorists eliminated, including pretty much all of the Hezbollah senior leaders. Everybody at the top was taken out, and anybody that they promoted to that position also got taken out. But bottom line, IDF estimates that we don't know yet, the IDF has not put out numbers as far as how much of Hezbollah is left,
Right.
What have we done so far,
Yeah.
and what are their capabilities? But they did say that they estimate that Hezbollah has less than 30% of their UAVs that it did before the war. So if Israel has already taken out 70% of their UAVs, hopefully that means 70% of their missiles, their rockets, terrorist infrastructure, command centers, tunnels, storage facilities, all that kind of stuff. Hopefully that is very, very good news.
Yeah, Reuters right here. I just saw saying that they've lost up to 4,000 soldiers, the Hezbollah warriors, which is good. And it actually, to put that in comparison, it says that that's 10 times the number that was taken out in the 2006 war.
So that's good news.
So that's good news.
Yeah.
They've done a much more, because what we saw in 2006 was they didn't do enough to actually to halt it. They didn't stop it. They didn't. It was in a little.
Right.
And then look, it came back up almost 20 years later.
I guess that's what we don't want to happen now.
Right.
With this ceasefire is Israel went so far and really crippled Hezbollah, but stopped just in time for them to be able to rearm, retrain, re-strengthen. And then they become a menace again in another 10, 15, 20 years. So bottom line is Hezbollah has been crippled. Definitely believe that Israel has crippled Hezbollah, but not destroyed. So only way that I see this ceasefire being good for Israel is if Israel really is in such a bad place that they're, almost out of weapons and ammunition. Israel's economy is suffering. You have, I think, at least 60,000 civilians that are still not back in their homes in the north.
Yeah.
Even with the ceasefire, they're still not back in their homes because Israel has to they have to
Validate
give it enough time to make sure that there is going to be quiet for civilians. We actually stayed in an Airbnb on the Lebanon border last year, and a lot of these communities, the kibbutz we stayed in, the house we stayed in was a 3-minute walk from the fence. With Lebanon, you could go look into Lebanon, right? So these 60,000 civilians, they returned to their homes Hezbollah could toss a grenade over the fence and it's a
Right.
threat, right? So Israel's not going to even now, like it might be a month or two, and if the ceasefire holds, that they can go back to their homes. So that's kind of the only way I see the ceasefire being good for Israel is Israel dealing with so much, and we're talking about 14 months of war now, that Israel just has to get back to some kind of level of normalcy. But like you were saying, if Hezbollah is not eradicated and destroyed, then is it really a victory for Israel?
Sure. And I would hope that they would, maybe if it is just a restock, get everything organized again to finish the job, then that's great news, especially under a current administration that's not being so helpful in America as the other big thing.
Because you can guarantee that Hezbollah will violate the ceasefire. Well, and then it doesn't have to be Israel's fault when they have to start fighting again.
Which another positive would be is that they're just waiting for a positive administration in America that would back them up. The issue I see there is that maybe Trump doesn't want to be the person that's known for war all over the place. He's probably going to want to have it finished by the time he takes office, was my thought. I don't know.
Also, apparently, a lot of the world kind of tends to fear and respect Trump because, I mean, it was like he was elected.
Yeah.
And I mean, it's just what it appears to be. Right, I don't know. But I mean, it was like ceasefire. Oh, we want to negotiate. We want to stop fighting all of a sudden. So
that's the deal on Lebanon.
I don't know. Whatever you guys could say what you think on that.
I think that's the deal on Lebanon. What I would like to, what we will eventually get some more news on that's happening now is everybody thought it's flip flop from what it was originally going to be. Remember this, Luke? It was the Lebanese when the Hezbollah got in. They said we're going to keep fighting until there's a ceasefire in Gaza.
Right.
Well, now look at what's happened. Hey, there's a ceasefire in Lebanon, and there's no ceasefire in Gaza. So now everybody's putting their pressure. Israel, stop. I mean, Israel's this close to obliterating Hamas, yet they're trying to stop them before they fully obliterate them, before they fully finish them. And so really the tide, it's flipped now, and Hamas is still engaged and looking for a ceasefire now. They're at the end of their rope. They're looking for a ceasefire. But what will happen there, we do not know. But they're searching for it because they're at the end of their rope.
I'm going to guess that Israel's not going to go for a ceasefire unless it's like Hamas lay down their arms and all the hostages are returned immediately. Because I mean, there's like reports out. Egypt, an Egyptian delegation supposed to be in Israel soon to mediate a ceasefire, and these reports are like, in the first 60 days of the ceasefire, we'll talk about which hostages will be released first, et cetera. And, we'll let Hamas escape into Egypt and yada, yada. And I'm just like, Hamas is done for. Israel's not going to go for some kind of ceasefire that allows them to talk about bringing their hostages home, right? That's not happening at all.
Which I would see that 100% totally different situations. What we got going on in Lebanon versus what we have in Gaza. Obviously, with the sole differences is the hostages. So from day one, Israel would have pulled out of there if they would have said, "Oh, here's all of your people back." They would have been like, "Whoa."
Right.
They wouldn't. They still. There's a lot of people who wanted to go and finish Hamas, but Hamas has known from day one that was the big problem. Holding hostages has been the number one issue in Israel and the biggest reason for all the war.
Well,
and so
obviously,
if they would give these people back, the war would have been over. And that's what they continue to refuse today. And I wish the world would understand that, because the world is bashing Israel and not understanding that there's still not only Israeli hostages, but American hostages being held by these brutes in Gaza. And there's one way to get peace, and that is send these people back to their homes. Surrender. And I wish the world would understand that. But they're not. They're pushing for a ceasefire when there's still people that
Hamas is going on 14 months of being pounded.
Right.
Enemy destroyed.
Yeah,
it's like
how much 70% or something of Gaza.
How much more can the people of Gaza take?
Yeah.
I'm just surprised they haven't taken out Hamas themselves.
Well, it tells you how ingrained and how embedded the ideology of and Jew hatred was. Is that it was so? I mean, more than 80% supported Hamas. I would like to see what the figure is today.
Yeah,
maybe there's been a change of heart. I would hope so.
Yeah, who knows, guys? Don't forget to click the link below to support Israel's wounded soldiers and their families. Let us know what you think about today's topic in the comment section below. Let us know what you think about our brand new studio coming to you from Israel's biblical heartland. We're going to be adding people. We have the potential to have Israeli guests on the show every single week. So let us know what you would like to see, what you want to hear from us here at the Israel Guys. We would love to hear from you. Make sure to subscribe. We got lots of exciting projects coming up for 2025. As always, stop listening to the lies and propaganda and connect with the truth of what's happening in Israel. We'll be back very soon here at the Israel Guys.